Developments on the US-China trade front, with the two economic powerhouses working towards a deal. In Japan, the Nikkei closed up 0.47%. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong reversed earlier gains as it declined 0.39%. On mainland China, stocks fell on the day, the Shanghai Composite shedding 0.87% and the Shenzhen Composite component was 0.57% lower. In Tokyo, the Nikkei was 0.5% higher, the Hang Seng easing 0.4% and the Shanghai Composite Index down 0.9%. The S&P 500 hit a record high on Monday, while the Nasdaq fell just short of its lifetime high touched in late July. This is a more civil tone between the United States and China lifted hopes for a possible trade deal, and investors look towards the Federal Reserve rate cut later this week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.5%, the S&P 500 gained 0.6%, and the Nasdaq Composite added 1.01% to settle at 8,325 index points. Well, for more on what's happening on the markets, we cross now to Nastasia Aronsa, who's standing by for us. Nastasia, what's going on?
Good afternoon, Nompumelelo. We saw the JSE open lower, of course, as investors look to events such as what is happening in Europe with regards to a possible fresh push by Prime Minister Boris Johnson for a snap general election. Investors are also keeping an eye on the Federal Reserve announcement. We saw the Asian markets, as you mentioned, a bit mixed. Earlier on, they started the day being led by the Nikkei, of course, and then we had the US-China trade relations. That discussion seems to be advancing, with President Donald Trump saying that they may be ahead of schedule with regards to signing a possible deal. Locally, we saw the Rand reverse a little bit of its gains, and this is on the back of Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan as he unveiled the possible turnaround plan for Eskom. It did rather emphasize a lot on renewable energy, shorter in detail when it comes to that debt restructuring. We also had some company news yesterday at the close of markets from Aspen, so we're going to be discussing all of that. But before we get to all of those market news, let's have a look at how some of these global developments and global news playing out in the markets. Well, joining me in studio to unpack the markets a little bit further, I'm joined by Shaun Murison from IG South Africa. Thank you so much for your time. So, JC, as you mentioned a little bit before we got off air, something funny is happening with the markets. Perhaps you can explain that in more detail.
Oh, yeah, I'll do the difficult work. We're always looking for reasons to explain what's happening in the markets. It's not exactly what I thought would happen today. We have an improved risk sentiment. You can see that by the decline in the gold price. It's now dipped back below that $1,500 per ounce mark. Some progress on the US-China trade deal. We've seen the European Union grant a 3-month extension to the Brexit plan. These are positive developments. Obviously, we still have that concern around the, what's happening in terms of, general election and possible referendum within the UK. But all in all, I don't think that, despite the fact that we are down today, and it is broad-based selling, I don't think it's panic, and I still do think there's positive sentiment in markets right now.
On the corporate side, it's a little bit quiet on the JSE, but yesterday after the markets closed, we had Aspen come out with an announcement that they're going to be writing down the sort of heartburn medicine for, I think, just over 700 million rand. But overall, when you looked at Aspen's numbers perhaps a month ago, you almost got a sense as though perhaps the CEO, Stephen Saad, had a feeling of relief. They've pretty much, I suppose, managed to do what they planned on doing, cutting debt and, bumping up cash. Based on all of that, then, does it give one the impression that perhaps Aspen is turning a corner?
I'm not as optimistic just yet. Okay, so I think the heartburn medication, the write-down and impairments relating to that, I think it's 719 million. It's I think it only accounts for something like 0.3% of group revenue, so not that material. The last results, we are seeing slimmer margins. They have been trying to downsize and deleverage their book. So, debt levels are very, very high. They've taken it from 50 odd billion down to about 40 odd billion. It's looking much better, and it's definitely moving in the right direction. But, net profit was still down, double digits decline in net profit. Margins are becoming more pressured. So it's a complicated one. I think I'd like to see a little bit more continuation in sort of see the company return to some sort of earnings growth rather than contraction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And overall JSE activity, I mean, if you speak to some traders, they'll tell you, trading volumes continue to, look a little bit lower, look a little bit more subdued. What kind of catalyst is missing in the markets to be able to get back to the levels that, or perhaps even the volumes that people are so used to? Because some of them, you'd swear it's December, like the way the volumes look so low.
We were looking at that the other day, and there was definitely in 2017 December, the Steinhoff debacle seemed to have been a game changer.
Yeah.
Since then, we've had a lot of issues of corporate governance. A lot of the market darlings have started to disappoint people. Companies that have been trying to expand offshore are not doing too well. Companies have been expanding into the rest of Africa have been under, just suffering hyperinflation. And the market darlings are no longer market darlings in that point. I think for the SA Inc. shares, we just need to see some signs of growth, a return to growth and meaningful growth, not 0.6 to 1%, and with that, obviously an improvement in employment. Employment data came out today, and it's pretty dismal. 29.1% is the worst in a decade. So we just need to see some of those economic indicators start to tick up and re-encourage investment into South Africa. And then obviously, you've got your the state-owned enterprise problem as well.
I mentioned in the intro that investors are looking at the Fed announcement expected later today. What are your expectations? Are you expecting a cut?
Yeah. The dollar's actually started strengthening today, which is quite interesting because yesterday we hit all-time highs. The dollar was quite weak, and the general consensus is 25 basis point cut, but I think the market is getting the impression that this might be the last cut for a while. The US labour market is looking very, very strong, and perhaps what we're going to see accompanied with that is a bit more of a hawkish stance about future policy announcements or future stimulus.
In terms of events or news that you're keeping an eye on, whether it be global or local, what are some of those?
So locally, definitely tomorrow's midterm budget speech. We'll keep an eye on that. We'd like to see where these, like you mentioned earlier on, the funding for our ailing state-owned enterprises, in particular Eskom. I think at the beginning of the year we had allocated 69 billion over 3 years. Then, 6 months later, or whatever it is, we've almost doubled that allowance over the next 2 years. So the provisioning there, and then following on from that, on Friday we have the Moody's Investor Relations Review. So depending on what happens in the budget speech, that could be quite. It could be. We don't think that there's going to be a ratings downgrade. At the very worst, we think we're still going to manage to be investment grade, but perhaps maybe a change in the outlook from stable to negative, giving us another 12 months or so.
All right, Shaun, thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there. That is Shaun Murison from IGSA talking to us about the markets. Of course, investors keeping an eye on that Federal Reserve announcement, and also locally investors keeping an eye on the Rand. As I mentioned earlier, we did have the Eskom plan unveiled by the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan. So from me, goodbye. After the break, Nompumelelo Siziba will be with you with more of your news.